Yeah, I've been working on this movie for over 8 years, and I came across the story quite unexpectedly. I was producing a short documentary inside of a maximum security prison in Kansas, and it was my first time ever behind the walls. And on the tour of the facility, we were doing a film about something else, but I passed by a cell, and there was a young man raising a rescue dog inside of a cell, and it just stopped me in my tracks. And I think the reason is it completely upended all my expectations of prison and incarcerated people. And a lot of those expectations were built on the movies I grew up watching. But here in this cell was a picture of like healing that was happening in both directions between this man and this animal. And I saw this person in the fullness of their humanity right there. And I was just desperate to learn more. Was there anyone else out there doing things differently? And that night in the hotel, I asked that question of Google and typed it in. And near the top of the search field was this program in New York, Rehabilitation Through the Arts. And they had been putting plays on at Sing Sing since 1996. They had been, covered in all the major press. They'd done all the classic plays. But there was this Esquire article about a 2005 production of a time-traveling musical comedy called Breaking the Mummy's Code. And I was just so struck by the tone of it, the playfulness of the work and the joy that these men were finding through that process, despite the environment that they were in. Sing Sing is one of the most famous prisons in the world, and, has been around for almost 200 years. And yet, on top of all that history, this vibrant artistry was flourishing, and I was so attracted to that, and that's how I got involved. It was an 8-year journey, and it didn't all come out of the oven baked. It took us. It was a process of learning and listening and paying attention to what was happening and what was special, and through a massive community effort of not just the performers and our cast of, actors, from this program who were acting in their first film, and then some legends of the screen like Coleman Domingo, but it was also all of the artists bringing, from the different crafts together, constantly poking and questioning and discovering the way that it should be told. It took time. Coleman, when he got involved, really sensed that this was a project that he could bring all of himself to, not just as an actor, but as a storyteller and a producer. And he really helped shape the character he played and the broader film, from the ground up with us. And when someone has an opportunity to bring all of themselves, to it, that shows, I think, in the work. When it's a culture and a space that is as warm and encouraging as this set was, creates the conditions for magic to happen. And yeah, this movie, I think the best way to put it, particularly around the ensemble, is it was a beautiful exchange, of actors who are bringing decades of, experience on screen into a space with men who are bringing decades of experience from this actual setting, and together, lifting each other up to sort of this transcendent plane that wouldn't be what it is with its independent parts. It was through this beautiful collaboration that lifted the whole project up to where it became. Well, early on, a big challenge was, trying to tell a story that worked against stereotypes in an industry that has proliferated them. And anytime we would try to get this movie going, and try to find support from the industry, it would oftentimes either fall on deaf ears or, we'd feel pressure to conform to like the narratives that had preceded us. And yet we're like, no, but this is something we have. This is refreshing. This is something we haven't felt or seen before, and it's really happening. Like, this is where the focus should be. And so that was an uphill battle, that's part of why it took so long. On set, I think the biggest challenge was shooting in some of these locations, which our primary set that was doubling as Sing Sing was a place called Downstate, which was a maximum security prison that was closed a month before we went in there. And the entirety of our alumni cast had been incarcerated there at one point in their lives. And so they were willingly walking back through those gates to tell this story. And it's even decommissioned, it's still a hard place to spend any amount of time in, and that's due to the miles of razor wire that surround this whole complex that feel like it's sort of strangling you, to the heat. Most prisons in America don't have any heating or air or much ventilation, and so it's very stifling and it just kind of weighs on you. And then there's also just like the ghosts in the walls, and that's for anyone walking through those gates, but especially for the men who are acting in this film who were really there at one point in their life. There's a scene with Divine Eye inside of a cell in the movie. That cell is directly beneath a cell he occupied at one point in his life, And by and large, like, our cast would say that any discomfort, they felt the purpose of what they were doing outweighed that, and they gained their confidence through doing this together, and realizing that this was a chance to share a story that's very precious to them with the world. We've been touring this film kind of like crazy across the U.S. and have found how much across those audiences that we share, but they all have their kind of unique fingerprints. And so I'm just eagerly counting the hours till I get to show this movie to the audiences here at Edinburgh and feel, once again, the universality of how storytelling can bring us together, but what will be the unique fingerprints of this audience tonight.